What's happening, guys? Cooper Carter here for G66, and on this week's Fractal Friday, I'm going to show you a surprisingly simple method for dialing in a tone and optimizing it for anywhere from 1 to up to 16 different guitars inside of one Fractal preset. One of the most frequent questions that I get is, how do I optimize a tone or a given sound or preset for use across a wide variety of different guitars? Now, of course, you have different guitars for their different tonalities, for their different functions, for their different features. And in general, I'm the type of player that likes to dial in one sound and then use different guitars to actually make that sound speak in different ways. I like the different tonalities that come from using different guitars, and I don't really in general want to account for those differences by changing presets for use with specific guitars. But every once in a while, I do come across a sound that I feel could use, for example, a little more gain with a certain guitar, or maybe even a little bit different EQ. Now, of course, this is a very quick video, but if you do want to get the absolute most out of your Fractal Audio Systems unit, whether that's the Axe-Fx3, the FM9, or the FM3, make sure to visit classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Fractal Audio Masterclass series. Now, as with so many things in Fractal land, there are several different ways that we can account for the differences between guitars. For those who follow Fractal Friday, you will have seen my tone tour through Gavin Rosdale's rig with the different presets that we designed. And for some players, it may make sense to simply have a different preset for each guitar. For Gavin, we have the Jazzmaster, the SG, and the Strat. So for example, if we go to the Jazzmaster, we see that the amplifier has been tweaked for just that guitar. If we go up to the SG, it's the same preset and the same for the Strat as well, but we've just adjusted the amp block in each. Now, this can be a great method if you do only have a few guitars. If you are more of, let's say, a rhythm player with just a few effects, and those effects are pretty set, they're pretty cut and dry, and you know what you want them to be, and you're really never going to change them. In that case, you can dial in a couple of presets and know same sounds adjusted for different guitars. But of course, the drawback to this is if you have more guitars, or if you have complex presets with a lot of effects where you want to change those effects and have it carry across all of your different guitars at once, keeping up with all those presets could really be complicated. So of course, the next option that I've covered in a previous Fractal Friday is to use scene controllers and set up different scenes that change various parameters to account for the differences between various guitars. So in this case, I have scene controllers attached to the gain of this amplifier and to the high cut of this amplifier. And as I move between my different guitars, JP6 to Cutlass, the gain comes up to account for the much lower gain Cutlass. Majesty, the gain moves down and the high cut comes up to account for the very high output pickups of that guitar. And then of course, I've got some settings for absolutely cranked here and then super clean. The scene controllers move these parameters, and I have specific settings that work for each of those guitars. This is great if I have several guitars, but I want to build a preset where I have control over a lot of complex effects, and the effects remain the same across those guitars. The downside, of course, here is that I'm locked into only the parameters that I can control with scene controllers, and I'm having to devote my scenes to guitar-specific sounds. Because my scene controllers are adjusting the amplifier to account for my different guitars, I'm going to be limited to 8 sounds. So for example, JP6 clean, JP6 dirty, JP6 with delay, Majesty with delay and reverb, and I'm going to run out of scenes pretty quickly. Which would lead me to next say, okay, well, then maybe let's just use amp channels. In that case, on an Axe-Fx3 or an FM9, I would have up to 8 different settings for different guitars. So I could use channel A for my JP6, I could use channel B for my Cutlass, channel C for the Majesty, channel D for another guitar, maybe a Valentine, and then I could use the 4 channels on this amplifier as well. So I have 8 different channels I can switch to with a foot switch to account for different guitars. Then my 8 scenes are freed up to build out an effects preset with scenes that are, instead of guitar settings, sounds, rhythm, lead, atmospheric, etc., etc. I would just set the amp then to scene ignore, and then I could move through the various sounds I create while the amp channel stayed the same and stayed on that guitar. But again, here, like before with scene controllers, I'm limiting myself to account for the differences in my guitars. So for example, if I have 2 different guitars that I want to switch between, I have at most 4 sounds that I can have for each guitar. If I have 4 guitars, I have at most 2 sounds that I can have for each guitar with 8 channels. I could have a JP6 and a Cutlass Class A on A and B, a JP6 and a Cutlass Bass Guy Bass on C and D, and et cetera, for the second amp block. So let me show you a method that not only offers more options and finer control, but it also is easier to implement and can be expanded to include settings for up to 16 different instruments. So here I have my current live preset, and it has a huge variety of sounds. I've got an AC20. I've got a bandmaster that's super clean. I've got an AC20 lead. I've got an ODS lead. An ODS lead with a flanger. And finally, a massive atmospheric sound. These are drastically different sounds with a lot of different effects being switched. So if I wanted to make adjustments to this preset to account for, let's say, 4 different guitars, my best option would probably be to create 4 different versions of this preset, one for each of the guitars. But then let's say I wanted to tweak the delay and the reverb. I would then need to make those delays and reverbs consistent across 4 different presets, keep up with all of the changes, make sure I've copied them all to the different presets. So let's instead add a new block at the very top of this chain. I'm going to add a parametric EQ. And I'm going to go to my AC20 scene here. And I've got my Cutlass. That's going to be channel A. And let's see how I feel about this sound. It's not bad. I think I'm going to add a little bit of upper mids here. And I'm thinking probably a little bit of gain as well. So I'll just bring the level up, let's say 2.5 dB. That's sounding really nice to me. So let's go ahead and plug in my JP6. I'm going to switch to channel B, and let's see what we have here. Obviously, since it's a humbucking guitar, it's a little higher gain, it's a little darker. So let's add a little sparkle up here to the top. I'm going to come up to around 4K. I might actually take a little bit of this low end out as well. You could, of course, be using a graphic equalizer here. I like parametric EQs, so that's what I'm sticking with here. Let's switch over to my Majesty and make another channel here. So the Majesty, again, here, pretty high gain, a little dark, a slightly different EQ though than the JP6. So let's add, again, a little sparkle up here. Let's come up a little bit higher though than we did on the JP6. And that's sounding good to me. So let's go ahead and switch over to my Valentine and make a 4th channel, D here. So for this tone, it's sounding a little boxy, so I'm just going to take a little bit of mid out. And that totally cleared it up right there. Let's add a little touch of gain as well. So tiny little adjustments here, but we're really just massaging the tone ever so slightly to work better with each of these guitars. So I've now set up channels for my Cutlass, my JP6, my Majesty, and my Valentine guitar. So 4 different guitars, 4 different EQs, 4 different levels of gain, And the amount of granular control that we could have here, if you wanted to get even crazier, is obviously pretty intense. So now all we need to do is turn on scene ignore on each of this block's channels, so that once we select a guitar, so for example, the Valentine here, I can move between any of these sounds, and our Valentine specific settings are going to carry over. And I could now switch over to FC Edit. We could pick a layout on my FC controller. Let's say, for example, this Perform tab here. And let's go ahead and replace these preset buttons here with buttons to select our guitars. So I'm going to just go to Effect. I'm going to select Channel Select here. I'm going to go to PEQ 1 all the way down here. And now I'm going to set this as channel A. I'm going to set second press to Smart Bypass. And now I'm going to do a custom name, and I'll just call this first one Cutlass. Let's go ahead and copy, paste, name this one JP6 and switch it to channel B. Paste this here, channel C, Majesty, and finally paste again, channel D, Valentine. With Smart Bypass on, I can change between my guitars at will, and then by clicking again the guitar that is on, I can bypass the PEQ entirely for a fifth sound, just the preset without any guitar-specific PEQ. Maybe I dialed it in for, let's say, my single coil cutlass, and the cutlass setting can be for my HSS. Versus all the other methods that I briefly showed you, this is by far, to me, the most straightforward way of accounting for the differences between guitars, and it also offers you a lot more control, all within one preset if you choose, where all of your effects can be tweaked and dialed in as much as you want without changing anything that you've done to set up your different guitars. And because in the Aspects 3 we have up to 4 different parametric EQ blocks, we could dial in up to 16 different guitar settings using just the PEQ. And then if you wanted to get even crazier and go up to 32 different guitar settings, you could integrate graphic EQ as well. You could also start using the channels on the input block if you wanted to only adjust gain by using the output level and assigning channels to different guitars in this block as well. Now, of course, that could get a little crazy. You'd be giving up a lot of real estate on your FC controller just to select between different guitars. But because it's Fractal Land, if you want it to happen, it is possible. I hope this video proves useful to you in your own playing. If you did enjoy it, please do make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to G66's channel, and leave me a comment in the comment section below letting me know what you'd like to see on a future Fractal Friday. As always, if you guys want to get the absolute most out of your Fractal Audio Systems unit, whether that's the Aspects 3, the FM9, or the FM3, make sure to visit classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Fractal Audio Masterclass series. For all things Fractal Audio, keep it right here on G66, and I will see you guys next week on Fractal Friday.